And it's been a great effort thus far. Obviously, some really difficult decisions coming over weeks and months. And Darren, I know you're a sports fan, as is Fiona and myself, and we all want to see the football back as soon as possible. But I just wonder by setting that ambitious date, the NRL, whether they can meet that. I hope they can. I hope the numbers, continue to slide and disappear completely. But I just wonder whether they will be able to get to that date.
I think we're going to be dealing with the coronavirus probably for most of, if not all of, this calendar year. It seems very ambitious to me that a sporting code, unless you have teams of players essentially isolate and play in an isolated location and stay there for a fixed period of time, I don't see how people can come and go from their community, use commuter transport, and then end up in different locations. They train together, they go in a bus together. It really seems like a lot of risk to me. Look, I'm like you and Fiona, big sports fan, love to be entertained during this time when we're sort of spending a lot of time in our own homes, but I don't want to see unnecessary risks taken either. So I'll leave it to the experts, but it does seem very ambitious to me.
It would be good for morale, Fiona, on the one hand, but Darren does make a good point that there is that element of risk, and I think that most Australians, those at home today, those that have done the right thing, watching, staying at home on Easter Monday and over the long weekend, it would be so devastating to us if we saw an outbreak courtesy of being too premature on something like that.
Yeah, but look, Kieran, I mean, we're all here on the Sky News platform, and within the sister channels here, we've also got Fox Sports. And look, I think whilst we are all social isolated, the ability of sport platforms like Fox Sports to be able to broadcast our sport, I think, is absolutely important at this point in time. And look, my point here, though, is going back to our geographic benefits. We have so many isolated communities that we could house rugby league teams or rugby union teams or, soccer or AFL. Now, so for instance, throw a team out on Hamilton Island, put another one on Rottnest Island. There's a whole range of things that we could do there that could facilitate our sport opening. Now, by having our sport opening through some of these things and the media platforms that we have, we could beam our codes to the world. That would be phenomenal. When we then look at, say, into summer, when we have summer cricket, I mean, to be able to offer an invitation to, say, the British team, come out in September, self-isolate, isolate once again somewhere like Hamilton Island, it's a pretty spectacular place to be. Let them stay there for a month, make sure they're perfectly clean and free of the virus, and whether that be the British team, the Indian team, the Pakistani team, it doesn't really matter. If they're isolated within those locations, have all the appropriate medical testing, we could potentially even host a sport like cricket in the summer, whilst the coronavirus is potentially still rampant through other places of the world. So look, I don't think sport is off the table. I think we've just got to be creative how we are going to play it and how we're going to show our sport and our country to the world through this period of time.
Yeah, Darren, that creativity is interesting that Fiona is talking about there. I had a senior politician, hasn't said it publicly, but privately, saying they want to see our major codes back because months through winter, without that sort of thing that we normally rally behind, our footy teams and so on, will be very, very hard to sustain this sort of level of restriction, Darren, without some of those sort of outside of the square approaches that Fiona, I think, is right to be considering, and I hope the codes are as well.
Sounds like from when we were kids, the old "it's a knockout." It's in a secret location, only accessible by helicopter. And look, I'm not saying that you can't do it, but I think you would need to pick somewhere such as Hamilton Island and probably put all of the teams on that island for a period of time. Maybe they bring family, maybe they don't, but basically have a sealed area that people are, it's pretty rare for people to go inside or outside that area, and essentially put the whole code in. It doesn't seem to me that you can rely on commercial flights and other forms of commuter transport, because those are not going to be guaranteed to be safe. And if you have someone who returns or someone who arrives at a match who has contracted the virus, it's quite a tactile virus. It gets left on surfaces. If it gets sneezed into air droplets, if anyone's within that 1.5 metres, they may inhale or get onto their skin. Like, it's pretty easy to catch. And once one person catches it in a team, probably the whole code goes down. So I guess another part of it is expectation, that if you're going to promise that you're going to bring the sport to Australians for the winter, you probably have to do whatever you can to make sure that that promise is delivered. Because I can tell you from experience in government, Kieran, that setting an expectation that isn't met is worse than not setting that expectation at all.
The broader issue, Fiona, and I like that thinking, though, that in terms of just thinking creatively and trying to come up with ways that we can manage it. Given we've got such a massive country, surely there's some areas where we can just lock it down and say, OK, play your footy. But let's think about the broader issue now about easing restrictions. What's your take on that? We don't want to do it too early, do we? Because we've seen what's happened in the likes of Singapore and so on, where they've had spikes, where they've gone and eased in the face of a flattening curve.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. And whilst we're still having, even though it's a low number over the last 24 hours of 33, I mean, it just goes to show that people are still contracting this virus, even whilst we have the degree of social isolation that every Australian is practicing. So it's important that we do get that all the way down. The other number that's crucial in all of this is the fact that there's still a proportion of the population whereby the medical experts don't necessarily know how this person contracted the coronavirus. Now, majority of cases, yes, it's tracked back to the Ruby Princess or somebody that travelled internationally that went to a wedding and they know exactly how it got to where it is. But we don't know with every single case. Now, the problem there is that if you ease the social restrictions, then all of a sudden you'll have a spike and then you'll lose control as to where it is or how it's progressing. What we really need to do is to actually get all of the cases down to probably, I know this is going to be very unpopular, but probably down to 0 to know that we are safe. Now, that might be fine within Australia, but it still means that our international border has to stay closed. Or within our international border, anyone coming to Australia is going to have to be isolated within a hotel for a period of time to be able to go through a period of quarantine. So whichever way you want to cut this, sure, we may have our own restrictions in Australia eased over several months. And if you look at the economic packages, they are geared around a 6-month process, which means that the thinking even of Treasury is not to open social restrictions within the next week. Secondly, it's also a matter of the fact that our tourism industry is going to be impacted, as are our airlines, for a very long period of time.